What is up, fellas, and welcome to another episode of Rewriting History with me, the Goob. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Sigiriya that I talked about last week, have some good information to add to that. And then some very interesting stuff to talk about with the Predynastic Vases. Some things that have kind of shifted my perspective on them a little bit. I still think they're super significant. I still think they're legitimate, but some interesting information to cover. Unfortunately, I had every tech issue you could have this week, it would seem. And I did so much great research, and then I lost all of it. So I've been scrambling to try and recover the things that I had prepared for this episode. I got most of it back. Should still be a pretty good episode, but I'm a little bit frustrated and scrambled. Before I get into the Sigiriya stuff, if you haven't watched last week's episode, go check it out. Go watch it. Dr. Weiss was on the show, an archaeologist, a true academic and scientist who is open and honest with her opinions and answers. It was a very great interview. Really enjoyed it. Make sure you watch all the way to the very end. There's some questions that she answers at the very end that I found very interesting, and I don't think you're really going to hear other archaeologists say the things that you hear her say. So pretty cool stuff. Go check out that interview, watch the whole thing. Very good stuff. And then I had an analogy for understanding NAGPRA that hopefully is helpful, because it is just such a complex subject. It is really hard to tackle it all and understand it. Even in a couple hour time period, it's a lot to try and tackle. So I think I've got it in a couple minutes here. Let me know what you guys think. And it's by comparing it to YouTube censorship. So if you read the YouTube policies on, what you're allowed to say and what you're not, they're very vague and very broad, and there's no list of words that you're not allowed to say and are allowed to say. But you've seen, right, some of the ridiculous steps that they've taken enforcing these policies. And because they are so broad and vague, they can just enforce what they want when they want. And as a result of this, knowing, the creators on YouTube, knowing that pretty much anything can be enforced at any time and not knowing what will be and what won't be enforced, they're taking steps to prevent, getting dinged by this system, and enforcing their own policies. And so you end up with people like Charlie Kirk, who's a very strong free speech advocate, censoring the word illegal in reference to illegal aliens, because that might be offensive and that potentially could violate these policies. And the consequences for violating these policies are quite severe. You get demonetized, you get delisted, or you just straight up get deleted. So if you read the policy, again, it doesn't say anywhere in there that you can't say the word illegal. There's absolutely nothing in the policy that would even suggest that. But that is how we've seen these policies be enforced. And so you have these creators taking these even more extreme measures to try and avoid the severe consequences from these policies. And the exact same thing is happening with NAGPRA. If you read the NAGPRA law itself, there's nothing in there about the claims that I've been making, that it's effectively making archaeology illegal, that they're deleting all of the information, that research is being deleted. None of that is in the actual NAGPRA law. It is not written explicitly whatsoever. And even if you add on the updates, right, because the updates are separate from the law, the interpretations from the DOI, those don't explicitly say these things either. But you have examples like NAGPRA being used to literally return human shit to the natives, garbage like charcoal and corn cobs and animal bones from food scraps. These have all been enforced under NAGPRA and returned to the natives. So in the same way as YouTube's policies, they're incredibly broad, they're incredibly vague, and this is done deliberately so that they can enforce whatever they want, whenever they want. And the consequences for violating these policies is quite severe. There's very severe financial penalties to this, potentially even jail time, although that's really for very extreme cases. But the consequences nonetheless are very severe. And so you have these archaeology organizations that are implementing their own policies. Nowhere in NAGPRA is it written that you can't take pictures of artifacts or display pictures of artifacts, but potentially that could be enforced under this law. So these organizations are preemptively deleting every single photograph they've ever taken and banning any future photographs. So most people don't really understand NAGPRA very well, fair enough, but most people do have some understanding of YouTube censorship. So hopefully that helps, understand things a little bit and in a shorter time period, because I don't know, that took me a couple minutes, and I think that most people can understand that, right? Hopefully. Let me know what you guys think. But on to Sigiriya or Sigiriya or whatever you want to call it, apparently. It doesn't help me remember all of these Hindu names when apparently as long as you start the name with an S and end it with an A and have any combination of R, I, G, Y, and sometimes A in the middle, it's correct. So Sigiriya, whatever you want to call it, I guess. I was struggling to find good information 2 weeks ago when I talked about this. So I was going like purely off of memory from research almost like a decade ago. Thankfully, I didn't get it too wrong, but I do have a lot of good stuff to add, a lot of new information. So let me pull up these pictures here for you guys. Give me a second. Okay, that's not the right window, but are you guys seeing what I'm seeing? No, you're not. One more try. Give me a second here. There it is. Okay, StreamYard wasn't picking it up. Now it is. All right. Let me switch to this layout. I like that layout better. Okay, so Sigiriya, this is allegedly about 1,500 years old. It was rediscovered around the 50s, 60s, I believe, or at least that's when it was excavated in the 50s and 60s, and it was done so. I've got the guy's name here. Let me pull up the guy's name here. I'll show you why I have hard times. Sanaki Bandaranayake. Sanaki Bandaranayake is the archaeologist that did most, or if not all of the work at Sigiriya back in the 50s and 60s. This thing is 180 meters tall. I don't actually have, I don't have any, here's a picture of the top, I believe. So just getting a bit of a scale, because I don't think I very accurately represented how large this thing is when I talked about it. It's 180 meters tall, that giant rock outcrop. And just the top of it, just the top surface of that rock, the fortress on top, is 15 hectares or roughly 25 football fields. So the top of this thing is pretty darn large. And then the surrounding areas are obviously even larger. Only a third of this site has even been surveyed archaeologically. And only a fraction of that has been excavated. And then of what's been excavated, only a fraction of that has actually been published about. So there's not a lot of information on this structure, and that's not very unique for India. This is actually in Sri Lanka, but for that entire region, there's just not much known about, there's just not much known, right? And so like last week I showed a map between here and trying to remember all of these Indian names, Angkor Wat, and they're very far away, right? They're one's in Sri Lanka, one's in the middle of India. But I was pointing that out because both of them have very, very impressive water management systems. In Sri Lanka, there's millions of terraces, very similar to what you would find in Peru. In Sri Lanka, there's very extensive water management systems like this. In many other sites, there's these extensive gardens in irrigation and all kinds of water management systems across the country of Sri Lanka. It's very impressive. You also find a lot of that in Peru. We don't know much about these people at all. The people who built all of these terraces and the water management systems in Sri Lanka, we know very, very little about them. Kind of like the people who built all that stuff in Peru. I don't know. Is there any type of connection between Sri Lanka and Peru? I have no idea. There may be, there may not be. Just some similarities that I thought were interesting there. But also, is this culture who was responsible for all of this in Sri Lanka? Did they share their technology, or were they even responsible for it in India with Angkor Wat? Is there some relation there? I don't know, and neither do really the archaeologists. It's not a whole lot is known. So on Sigiriya, I was talking about the hydraulic system there, and I want to clear that up because these pictures are from either the 50s or the 60s. They're old, they're cool. And this is not, I'm pretty sure this is on the ground level, what we're looking at here. These are some of the water pools and, structures. There are structures built around the ground. Again, so little of this has been excavated. There's all kinds of stuff that's still sitting there in the surrounding area that just hasn't been excavated. It's very interesting. So finding pictures of Sigiriya has gotten more difficult over time, but here you have a terracotta pipe. This is on the outside of the giant rock, the boulder, the mountain. I don't really know what to call it, plateau. This is at the base of it. This is on the outside of it. So I made the claim that the top of the water tank was connected to these fountains down below. And I wasn't very confident while I was making that claim, but it is true. I don't believe there's a drain in the center of it, like I said there was. I believe the drains are at the top around the edges. So again, very little's been excavated. So I don't think it is entirely understood exactly what's going on here, because you can see this pipe, runs up into the structure. Like, that structure hasn't been unassembled to find out exactly where that pipe goes. And that's not the only example, right? So it's not fully understood, but we've got a pretty good idea of how it works. But finding information on that is very difficult. So a lot of this is me assuming things, okay? I assume that the top of this rock, this 25 football field sized rock top, is set up as a giant gutter, and it funnels all of the rainwater that falls on the top of the rock into the central pool. The central pool then has drains coming out of the top edge of it, so that when it reaches a certain height, the water will, rather than overflowing on the surface of the rock, go down the drains. Where the drains go inside of this rock, I don't know. I can't find images. I can't find information, but it goes through pipes all the way down the rock, all the way underground, and feeding into these water gardens down below. Really, really impressive stuff. There's also all of the water pools down below. Here you can see some of these. So these things also feed into each other. There's moats around it. There's a specific image I'm looking for. So here's one of the larger water pools on the ground level. It's this big octagonal water pool, and it's a few feet higher up than the fountains that, these water gardens down below. So it's gravity fed from there. It's also gravity fed from the very top of that mountain. And there's interconnectedness with the moats around it. It's a pretty complex and impressive system, and it's still operating 1,500 years later. These have not been repaired. I do want to stress that. Like this is still operating 1,500 years later. The terracotta pipes have waterproof mortar on them that has withstood 1,500 years. The terracotta pipes themselves have withstood this. This is all still functioning 1,500 years later. And the idea that this is 1,500 years old is debated by that archaeologist that I mentioned earlier. So there's this king. I have the name of the king too. Let me go ahead and read that to you guys. The king, I thought I had the king's name. King Kassapa. Okay, King Kassapa. And I have a direct quote actually from him here. Crediting King Kassapa with the site's water architecture, in fact, requires a suspension of disbelief. Neither inscriptions nor scientific dates support the case. Only by observing how the built architecture lies on the land might we believe we are in King Kassapa's Alakamanda, the metaphorical palace and garden complex of gods, as suggested by Paranavitana. So I guess that's another archaeologist that worked on it, Paranavitana. But yeah, he's saying that while if you read, I read his book, it was only 48 pages. But if you read his book, essentially he's saying that, yeah, King Kassapa was here. King Kassapa built on this land for sure. King Kassapa occupied this, but he speculates that this actually goes back older, further, and suggests there's no real evidence to suggest that King Kassapa actually constructed this site. He just occupied it and, built some structures on it, some additions to it. So this is an Indian archaeologist, I'm assuming by the name, right? That are making these claims back in the 60s. So I thought that was interesting because if you Google this, King Kassapa, this is all King Kassapa. That's really all you'll see. So yeah, let's just take a look through these photographs. They're interesting photographs. This is just a sketch. You can see here, just this whole area is unexcavated, right? Not a whole lot of work's been done here. Big tourist site though. Lots of tourists go there all the time. I like these old photographs, seeing them, 1,450 years rather than 1,500 years of wear and tear, right? You see these marks going up the rock here. Those are all over that giant boulder. I don't know what they are. They don't seem to be like hand and foot holds. They don't seem sufficient for that. But these types of markings and other somewhat similar markings, like you see this channel here, there's channels carved all over it. There's these, whatever these are, carved all over it. This is all over the outside of that boulder. And I talked about that a little bit, but and these aren't even the best photographs because they go up and down and across that huge giant mountain of a boulder. But here's an example of a little bit of it. I really don't know what this image on the left is showing, but here's the entrance, which is pretty cool. You got all these bricks and the stairs leading up, and then these giant natural stones making that beautiful entrance there. A bit of the top. It looks like there used to be trees growing up on the top of this thing. Those have been removed. More of the stairs. I don't think this looks quite like this now today. Maybe this is still all there. I don't know. I know that up here on the boulder itself, it's all metal stairs. Maybe this is just an angle that I'm not used to seeing. The boulder itself is full of caves also. There's caves all throughout it, and they're full of carvings and paintings, Hindu stuff, King Kassapa stuff. And this last picture are two other water gardens, I believe from Sri Lanka. He was just drawing a comparison showing that there's other similar sites. And yeah, I think that's what I've got for the Sri Lanka stuff. Again, I was scrambling to just have anything to present. So normally I'm like mentally preparing, going over what I'm going to talk about, and I didn't have any opportunity to do that for this episode, unfortunately. So there was definitely some other stuff I wanted to mention, but I guess I'll have to do that another week. Is my camera a bit hazy? Anyways, so on to the predynastic vases. I found a channel called Night Scarab, and he is a debunker of the vases, and I watched some of his videos, and they're the best videos that I've seen debunking the vases. He puts forward the best arguments that I've seen by far. He points out several mistakes that Ben Uncharted X makes, and he's good at presenting his information. He's very convincing. So I don't agree with everything he said. I don't agree with all of his conclusions. He's several times he's like, see this, and because of this, that means this, and like makes this bold declarative statement. And it's like, well, it could mean that. It could also mean half a dozen other things. So yeah, I don't agree with everything he's saying, but he does make a lot of really good points. And his videos are what set me down the rabbit hole of research that I did, which was absolutely fascinating. So I think I'll just start by showing you some pictures. Why not? Let's show some pictures of some of the stuff that I found. Okay, all right, there it is. All right, so this is the Foundation Gandor pour l'Art website. All of these images are in chronological order. So they're starting with the oldest and going to the newest. I believe red breach is red breccia. I believe this is breccia marble, and it's a translation issue. So this is roughly 5,000 to 6,000 years old. And this is the same style of vase that you guys are viewing what I'm viewing, right? I've got the right, yeah, okay, cool. Same style of vases that we're talking about with the predynastic vases that are being scanned. Are you guys still seeing what I'm seeing? Yes, excellent. All right. Here's a very, squat one. Again, breccia marble, same, going back potentially 6,000 years ago. And here is Badarian culture, so you have the dynastic Egyptians, and then you have like the Naqada culture that came before them, the predynastic, and then you have the Badarian culture even before the Naqada culture, and you have Naqada 1 and 2. But so these are very, 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 very old pre-dynastic Egyptians, and this is not stone, this is ceramic, but it's very beautiful ceramic. This is their style, the black top. Like you'll see modern ceramics looking very much like this. I'm getting feeling like I'm going to lose my voice for some reason. But just some beautiful ceramics from thousands of years ago. Here's a very interesting one. Look at the size of this too. 2.8 by 6.3 by 7.7. We're talking a couple inches here. I've got a bigger image pulled up. And this is going back 5,000 to 5,500 years old. So this is Naqada 2. This is pre-dynastic, before the Great Pyramids, before any of the pyramids. And look at this little froggy here. Absolutely incredible. Much more impressive than the round vases. This can't be turned on a lathe. And it sure looks like the inside is hollowed out too. It's not just a tube drill straight down. Sure looks hollowed out to me. Serpentine is also a 3 to a 6 on the Mohs scale. It ranges pretty broadly, which isn't actually all that uncommon for stones. So some of it's harder, some of it's softer, and you can see it's made up of different materials here. So that would probably be why. Not the hardest thing to carve, definitely not the easiest thing to carve. 5,500 years ago, very good looking little frog pot here. This has nothing to do with Egypt. I just thought it was cool. I thought it was fascinating. It's looks very modern, you know, almost cartoony. Cute little hedgehog. Here is, you know, very, very Steve Jobs. Got that black, sleek look to it, going back almost 3,000 years. Green quartzite. Very, very precise looking, very clean looking. I mean, that lip under there, the roundness, just all of it. Absolutely fantastic looking stuff. Here's a very interesting one. Also almost 3,000 years old. Also very, very tiny, about 2 inches here. Not sure if you can really make out anything about what may or may not be inside of that. It could be a straight tube drill. I can't tell from this image, but you have what is exquisite, you know, craftsmanship. This looks very perfectly round, very symmetrical to me. And then you also have the patterns on the outside and the lion little handles here. This can't be turned, you know, it can initially, but not these portions certainly. And again, this is serpentine. Here's a slightly different handle style, but otherwise very reminiscent of the vases we're talking about. Again, we're moving forward in time here. So now we're 4,500 years old. And this is a quartz crystal little vase here. Doesn't look absolutely perfect, but quartz is really, really hard, harder than granite even. Like what makes granite so hard is the quartz in it, other things as well. But the quartz is like the hardest part of it. And this is just pure quartz. Pretty impressive, pretty beautiful. Another vase, obsidian. And here we get into some of the alabaster vases. And look at the time here. We're now into less than 4,000 years old. And we're into dynastic Egypt, Middle Kingdom, 12th dynasty. And it's a pretty impressive calcite alabaster vase, right? But, you know, you look at these rings around the top here, they don't look perfectly even to me. The form of the vase itself looks pretty darn clean, but, you know, these have a bit of wobble to them. Maybe it's just the photograph, but, you know, softer stone here, maybe a little less precision. Here is, I think, for some cocaina or something similar, an alabaster spoon, just some beautiful art, you know, showing that they obviously were capable of making very beautiful art in alabaster. This is 3,500 years old. This is, again, 3,500 years old. And this is really high quality. I would say that this is maybe visually, you know, it's hard to tell from an image, but visually maybe compares to the quality of those earlier pre-dynastic hardstone vessels. Here's a obviously far less impressive alabaster vase. Same time period though, right? So it's like, people draw comparisons and try and put importance on, like, look, this piece looks bad, this piece looks good. Yeah, that makes sense. I wouldn't expect everything to be consistent quality across an entire culture's, you know, art production. Like that wouldn't make sense. So here's a crappy one, and from the same time period, here's a really nice one, both in soft stone though. This one also can't be turned. Look at the handle on this thing. Let's get a better look at this thing. That is, I'll let that load for a second. Again, 3,500 years old, roughly. We're talking New Kingdom here, 18th dynasty. That's around Ramses, I believe. I believe Ramses was 18th dynasty. You have this beautiful lip there. carved out and then flowing beautifully into that handle. This is absolutely exquisite work, and absolutely more modern, but also soft stone. This is not hard stone. This is soft stone, but absolutely incredible work. Again, 3,500 years old, roughly. Beautiful, beautiful alabaster, little swan handles there. Pretty impressive alabaster work. And man, talk about some Steve Jobs sleek black here. This is, again, same time period, obsidian, hard stone. And that is like the sleekest, cleanest looking vase out of any of them that I've seen, I think. Obviously, it's got some chips to it. But man, it looks just so sleek, so black. I'd love to get measurements on that. Is it perfectly symmetrical? What are the tolerances on this? Certainly looks very, very sleek and even and clean. And that's, 3,500 years old, roughly. Here's a very interesting piece. Again, soft alabaster, same time period, roughly speaking. Really impressive craftsmanship. But again, in soft stone. This one was very, very interesting. It's a pomegranate, very small. Again, it's limestone. I thought this was red granite. Still a very interesting piece. I thought this was red granite. Kind of looks like red granite. Looks a lot like red granite. I guess it's limestone. Limestone can still be pretty hard. Still a very, very interesting piece. Again, something that can't be turned. Would be curious what kind of tolerances are on a piece like this. More. Probably didn't need to put all of these in here. But again, these are getting more recent. This one looks pretty clean too. This is, 2,500 years old. 2,500 years old. Less than 2,500 years old. Got a handle on this one. Pretty darn clean looking. Less than 2,500 years old. This is from Italy. This got in here on accident. Didn't mean to even include that one. This one, however, is very interesting. The last image. Banded agate. Right around 2,000 years old. Very, very tiny. Very tiny. And extremely clean looking. Extremely clean looking. Very impressive, tiny little banded agate thing here. So, I did want to talk about some of the stuff that Night Scarab claims, because he tries to debunk everything that Ben says, and you can debunk a lot of what Ben says. Ben says things that aren't true, unfortunately. And if I were to guess, I would guess that Ben does not intentionally lie. I think he sees things and he says them and they turn out to not be true, but he wasn't intentionally lying about them. However, plenty of, he's a big channel. There's a lot of attention on him. Plenty of people have pointed out mistakes he's made. I find it very difficult to believe that he's not been made aware of any of these mistakes. Even if he does just ignore everything online, I'd imagine someone would have reached him in person and made some of these comments. So it would seem, giving him the benefit of the doubt, that he's mistakenly saying these things. He continues saying them, I imagine, after he's been informed that they might not be correct. So at that point, I guess that is lying. I kind of sympathize with him. I kind of feel like he's in a situation where it's you can't apologize to the woke mob. Even if you are in the wrong, apologizing only makes it worse. I think that might be the situation he feels he's in, where if he admits that he got something wrong, it'll just make the situation worse. Regardless, he does say some things that are untrue. One of the things he says is that, and this is actually what got me down the rabbit hole initially, not even the Night Scarab videos. This is what led me to the Night Scarab videos, was he claims that there's vases going back 14,000 years, that there are these precise stone vases 14,000 years old. There aren't. There aren't. That's that. As far as I can tell, that's just not true. It's just not true. He's trying to. He's saying the Nikeda culture, 14,000 years old. The Nikeda culture doesn't go back 14,000 years. Like, a lot of his claims here are a bit of a mess. But Night Scarab tries to debunk everything that Ben says, and in doing so, he like debunks himself. Like, several of his debunks are incompatible with each other; they're mutually exclusive. So, he tries to make the claim that you see very impressive vases throughout all of Egypt, and as I just showed you there, you do see some very impressive vases in softer stone. Not really in hard stone. There are a small handful of hard stone vases that pop up in later periods of Egypt that are very, very impressive. Equally as impressive as the ones that are being scanned. I would argue that there's so few and far between that it's quite possible that those are inherited. Those could have been passed down for generations, thousands of years even. And you see so few because that's all that made it through all of that time. Another option is that later time periods found small amounts of these vases and then claimed them for their own. And a third option is that there were some of these vases that had been preserved, a couple of them, right, were known about. And because they were known about, these later cultures then tried to recreate them and potentially even successfully recreated them, but they did so only a few times because the effort to do so was so intense. All of those are possibilities in my head to explain the very limited number of hard stone vases that you do find that are very, very impressive in these later time periods. Another explanation is the Romans. So I had a whole lot more images to show you that I don't have now. I do have a couple more images. I'll go ahead and pull those up. But I had a whole lot more images of very impressive vessels from Hellenistic, Ptolemaic, like when the Romans were interacting with Egypt, right? Because there are many very impressive vessels. Most of them, though, are in soft stone. And again, they pop up once Rome gets involved again, thousands of years later. So it's not like you have this continuation of impressive stone vessels throughout all of Egypt like Night Scarab is trying to claim. You really don't. You do see a huge drop-off in the Old Kingdom. You see these lower quality alabaster vases being produced. And you do see some higher quality alabaster vases being produced, but a lot of that, again, comes in later in Roman times, or the times I was showing you there, like 1,000 years later. So, yeah, I don't think his debunk on that argument holds up very well when you actually look at these things and look at the timelines. Are these the same images? Okay, here's a screenshot from his video, and these are some of the hard stone vessels from after the, right? These amethyst ones don't look nearly as impressive. I'm going to go ahead and bet that there's a straight tube drilled down in here and that they're not hollowed out and formed at all on the inside. The outside looks very crude in comparison. So imagine you have something like this that survived through the Old Kingdom all the way up to Tutmos, okay? And this is their attempt to recreate it. He's showing this as an example of debunking this argument, but I think honestly he's strengthening it here. And maybe they did make these, which look pretty impressive. It looks a little lopsided, this one here. Hard to tell from photographs. I don't want to pass too much judgment. They are slightly different in style in that they have lids, but, again, these don't have handles. Are these truly as impressive as the Predynastic style that you see? I think maybe they're not. And I think maybe that these were made as an attempt to recreate them. Here he does make a really, really good point, though. Really appreciate this point here. These are Minoan stone vessels, and Crete is not that far from Egypt. And they were also making some very, very impressive stuff. I don't think this he's pointing this out, which I already disagree. I don't think this stuff is from 12,000 years ago like Ben and so many other people do. That's the main disagreement I've had with Ben over this issue, is that I don't think this stuff is 12,000 years ago. And he's pointing to Crete. He's pointing out the fact that these are unique styles. You don't see this kind of style in Egypt. You don't see this kind of style in Egypt. You do see this kind of style in Egypt. We'll get to that, but you don't see it in the 5,000-year-old pre-dynastic vases we're looking at. So he's making a pretty compelling argument here that the Minoans also had the same ability. I am losing my voice, man. Had the same ability to work stone as the Egyptians did, and that they exercised it uniquely. They have their own designs here. So, the idea that both of these are 12,000 years old becomes a bit of a stretch. This is alabaster, just really impressive, just a very impressive piece that I wanted to show off a bit. Another very, very impressive piece. This is in a museum. I don't even know what it's made out of, but it's very, very thin. Again, I lost a lot of my research. I lost all my research, and I recovered most of it, but not all of it. This is a very, very interesting image here, because as far as I can tell, this is an incomplete vase. And it would seem that they started by forming the outside of the vase. They got up to the rim here, and something went wrong, and the rim broke off. And you can see the inside is solid still, which would mean that coring out the inside happened after forming the outside of the vase, and hollowing it all out happened after. I can't say for certain that that's what we're looking at here, but it sure looks like it to me. I mean, this is vase shaped. That sure looks like where the rim would have been, the little lip coming out, and it broke. I thought this was very, very interesting, because I'm not someone who makes vases out of stone, but that's not, I don't know. I think I'd expect the inside to be done first. Maybe not. Maybe that's totally normal. Maybe that's totally expected. But I thought it was interesting nonetheless. So he makes a lot of claims. One of the claims he makes is he claims to have measured a modern funerary urn from China, a granite funerary urn from China. I've talked about them, shown them on the channel. And he claims that the tolerances were roughly 1/1000th of an inch, the exact same tolerances you find in the modern marble vase that was scanned by Ben, and the ancient pre-dynastic vases that were scanned by Ben. And he's using this to claim that, well, this goes to show that those vases are modern forgeries. I don't agree with that. And there's some major, major issues with that line of argument, because there are vases, many vases in museums that are just as impressive as the ones that they're scanning. And they've started scanning vases in museums. So if that's the argument you're going with, you need to also question literally every single vase in every single museum and their provenance. And there's actually some very good reason to do that. I'm not going to have time to get to it today. I read a book from 1912 talking exactly about that, forgeries in Egyptian, like specifically these stoneware. There's not going to be able to get into it, but yeah, there's actually some valid reasons that to question the museum's galleries and go, hey, are all of these potential fakes? Maybe they are. But he claims to have, he didn't show any evidence of it, but I believe him. I believe he did measure one of these funerary urns in 1/1000th of an inch. It matches with other information I'm seeing, so I'm going to choose to believe that. I don't think that's proof that these other vases are modern forgeries. He also makes the claim that he contacted one of these Chinese manufacturers and asked them if they could make one of these vases. And they said, yes. And they gave him a price for it. And they said a minimum of 10 pieces. You'd have to order a minimum of 10 pieces, and we could do it for $45 a piece. So a total of $450. You could get 10 of these Predynastic vases made in a Chinese factory. Now, handles included, by the way. And he asked them, okay, how would you go about making the handles? And he gives an explanation, and it's a totally reasonable explanation. They could definitely do it that way. So, debunked, right? Well, he hasn't done it. He hasn't ordered the vases. No one has. Like, there's so much interest in this topic, and no one has produced one of these vases in modern times. Go make one. The Chinese can do it for $45, allegedly, according to Night Scarab. Someone do it. Like, do it. If that is your argument, there's enough motivation. Go start a crowdfund. Maybe I'll go start a GoFundMe to buy some of these vases, because goddamn, I want this settled. And to be honest, it wouldn't settle it for me. If a Chinese manufacturer did make a vase, I wouldn't go, oh, it's debunked. Like, like I said, there's still all these vases in museums that are equally as impressive. So I think there's still something there. But from the way it was described, it seemed that they were only addressing the outside of the vase. So could a Chinese manufacturer do this, and could they do it for as cheaply as $45? It's not unthinkable to me, but they're only addressing the outside of the vase. Would it actually be within the tolerances that we're looking at? I don't know. That's a great question. I would love to know the answer. Someone spend the money, go do this, go prove it, go prove your theory. It's not that much money. If you start a GoFundMe, Night Scarab, your channel is big enough. You can go start a GoFundMe. You'll have $1,000, which is what you said you needed. $500 for shipping, $500 for the vases themselves. Go start a GoFundMe. You could have $1,000 within a day. Go test this. Test it. Prove it. Do it. Okay? But I'm pretty sure that they are not addressing the inside of the vases. I'm pretty sure that they are not addressing the fact that these are hollowed out. Would that make this so much more complicated? I really don't know. I really don't know what degree of complication that adds to the process. I would love to know. Someone actually go buy this and find out, and then compare the modern vases and these supposedly ancient vases. Just do it. There's so much interest in this topic. And it makes me really dubious of his claim that he's saying all of this, because if it's truly that cheap, if it's truly that easy, why has no one done it? There's so much interest in this topic, and no one has come forward with a modern vase. And then also, could they do it to the thinness of like that thin vase that you can literally see the light shining through the stone? If you hold a light up to it or inside of it, the light shines out of it. Could they get it within those tolerances and within that thinness? Is that something that they could do? And what would it cost? I really want someone to do this. I don't know. I'm not, they have 3D printed them out of plastic. You can actually download the file for free and 3D print one yourself. I'm going to go through the comments. I'm absolutely going to have to come back to these vases in the Night Scarab videos, because I don't know if I'll address everything he says, but I definitely want to address some of the things he says, because of all of the debunking attempts that I've seen, his is the first one that I'm like, okay, you're actually onto something here. Okay, you actually have some good arguments. You actually have some valid arguments. And I have plenty of issues with his arguments too, but like, it's by far the best I've seen, because all of the other debunk attempts were quite pathetic, in my opinion. You look at Dan debunking that absolute retard, in his just outright lies and bullshit. I need to re-release that video, especially because he was just on Joe Rogan. I should do that. But yeah, I really dislike that guy. I don't have too many feelings on too many people in this space, other than like generally I like people like Ben. I think is cool, even though he does say things that aren't entirely true. I like him, you know. I really dislike Dan. I really dislike Dan. There's some stuff about him that, you know, I was like 8 years old and I was like, that Oprah bitch is fucking evil. I like the first time I saw her on TV, I was like, that bitch is evil. And everyone was like, you're crazy. She's the sweetest, nicest person in the world. And I maintained throughout my entire life, that bitch is fucked up. She's evil. And you know, it took like 20 years, but I've been vindicated. And I think I'll be vindicated with Dan too. I don't like him. I don't like him. Let me read through chat a little. Yeah, I'm gonna have to come back to the Vases. I've got a lot I want to talk about. I was scrambled for this episode with all the tech issues. I'm sorry, fellas. A lot of points I want to make. It changed. Like my thoughts are changing on the Vases, not so drastically that I don't think these are unbelievably significant, not so drastically that you know, I don't think they're legitimate or anything like that anymore, but like seriously doing some reevaluation on the Vases, and I want to present all of that fully and well, and it's going to have to be next week because I don't have the time and I'm not as organized as I want to be. I don't know if there's going to be an after show today because I am losing my voice. My throat hurts right now. I might, if you guys want to call in, let me know in the chat, and I might just let you guys call in, but I'm running out of steam here. I don't know what relevance that has, Slav. Cool. Do you want me to talk to her or something? I don't know. Angkor is Cambodia, not India. Okay, my bad. My bad, fellas. I do stuff like that a lot. Like I don't like to get things wrong. But when I do get things wrong, they're, at least to me in my head, like that's minor. Like I showed the map of it 2 weeks ago, you know, so I showed it on the map. Me misspeaking and saying Cambodia or India instead of Cambodia. Hopefully you guys aren't like, oh, Goob's unreliable. I am in that regard. I misspeak quite a bit, but I don't think that really affects the arguments I'm making here. And that's the majority of the mistakes that I make are just like misspeaking. But then you have Lee side pointing out other mistakes I make too. For example, the triads of Menkaure are not black granite. They are schist, a much softer stone. Still ridiculously impressive statues, but yeah, they're not black granite. The song for Wallaby. Oh, Wallaby's in here. Oh, hey man, how's good to see you. I'm sure he'll tell you. Desert Ekoth Desert, I believe. But yeah, it's a great song. Yeah, there's some definite bong potential with some of these. Yeah, you know, and like I said, I'm gonna have to get into it in a later week, but a lot of like the arguments that Night Scarab makes, he sounds really convincing while making them. But like I said, they're mutually exclusive. So it's like, okay, if you adhere to that argument, you've disproven your other argument and vice versa. So while it's the best debunk I've seen, he is very focused on debunking, right? He has an agenda. Okay. I'm not saying he has no interest in the truth or anything like that. I'm sure he does, but he seems to have a greater interest in debunking Ben in the Vases. And so that's very clearly his goal with these videos. He's trying to debunk and he's not trying to find the truth. Again, not that he's like, but you get what I'm saying, hopefully. Yeah, I talked about this several weeks ago, and yes and no. There actually are some pretty significant differences, and they affect how you can process these stones. You can cut marble, you can't cut granite. Um, Semantics, but like not. It does matter when you're actually working these things. It actually does affect what you're able to do and what you're not able to do. It was not just one thing. So I do most of my research on my phone. I'm not sitting in front of a computer all day every day, so like I get research in where I can when I can, and so most of it's on my phone. And my phone is not working. When I save images, they don't save. I get the little pop up showing that I saved it, and I can click the little pop up and it'll open the image indicating that it would be saved. But then when I go to my gallery, it's not there. And I know what you're thinking. Oh, it must be saving to some weird place on the phone, but it's not. That is not happening. And so a workaround that I found is double saving the image. If I save the image twice, I now have two copies of the image in my gallery, exactly where it's supposed to be. But if I save it once, it's just not there. The same is happening for other files like PDFs. Another issue I'm having is because I'm on my phone, I can't name the files as I save them. So especially for things like PDFs, like they're often just titled download.pdf. So I can really only save like one at a time. And so every time I save a new one, it overwrites the old one. That's another issue I'm having. There's a lot going on. There was like 10 different things. So it's like my research was erased redundantly. So my internet search history is not saving properly. So like I went through, when I realized that everything was gone, I went through that entire day of internet history and I clicked every single link trying to recover the research that I had done. And I found that the majority of my internet history was not being recorded. I wasn't in a private browser or anything. It just wasn't being recorded. So I wasn't able to find it. So it was just so much stuff, man. It was so much stuff. And it was very, very frustrating. I literally hand sawed Texas pink Rapakivi granite with a steel bandsaw with sandy water in middle school. That is very, very cool. And yes, like I said, semantics. And I broke all of this down in a previous episode. I'm not going to do it again, but you can watch that if you want in the old episode, cutting and grinding. Yeah, you're not actually cutting the granite, you're using the sandy water to grind it away. And the saw is the medium for that sandy water. With marble, you can just take that saw and you can just saw through, you can actually cut through the marble. It will actually cut the marble. The differences are subtle, but it does make big differences, especially when you're applying these things to something like a lathe and a high-speed lathe. Things are different. Things change. Yeah, screenshots are a workaround. I've been screenshotting a lot. Yeah, there's, yeah. I don't even know all of the problems I've had. Like I haven't even identified all of the issues I'm having so far because there are so many. I've identified several of them, and I haven't found a good way to work around it. Like to save a PDF file on my phone. Okay, so I have to save it, and then I have to go into my files, and then I have to go into settings, and then I have to rename it, and then I can save another one. That is a workaround. That I can do that. It would be great if there was an easier way, but I think that is what I have to do. So, yeah, still figuring out the problems, still figuring out the workarounds. Okay, cool. It's a lot softer than granite, though. You know what? I am going to go ahead and drop the invite link for calling in. No after show. I'm just going to open it up for calls. If you guys want, feel free to call in and talk about anything you want. And if no one wants to call in, that'll be the end of the episode. If you guys do believe in the Vases and you want to believe in the Vases, and you're not easily swayed in your opinions, go watch Night Scarab's video. They are good videos. Like, they're definitely good videos. But if you are easily swayed, and like you don't want to have your dreams in the Vases crushed, maybe don't go watch them, because he is convincing. He puts on a good presentation. I think I would be happy to debate him. I'd feel comfortable debating him. I'm not sure I'd win or come out on top, but I would feel comfortable enough to give it an effort. So yeah, I don't agree with his conclusions. I don't think he's correct on everything, but he does put forward a good presentation. So. By the way, what did you guys think of the YouTube analogy with NAGPRA? Like, I have not thought of a good way to communicate what NAGPRA is actually doing and why it's a big deal in literally in under hours. Like, even give me 2 hours and I wouldn't feel like I'd sufficiently explained it. Until now, with that analogy, I feel like I can actually get across the meat of what's happening. And most people understand YouTube censorship. Most people have some understanding of that. And so, like, they should be able to understand NAGPRA through that lens. I thought it was really, really good. I was very proud of myself. I don't know. I've heard about Out of Africa being debunked by many things. And yes, I've heard that one, I think, a couple different times. There's the Dragon Man, there's all kinds of stuff. So I don't know necessarily specifically what you're referring to, but I've heard things like that for sure. Man, that conversation with Dr. Weiss last week was so cool. I needed that. Having like the questions at the end where she confirmed my own beliefs, were at least possible. It's like, I'm a mentally strong person, but having the whole world tell you you're wrong constantly, like, you at least have to check yourself occasionally, and it does wear you down a little bit. But what's up? How you doing, man? Beautiful scenery you got going there.
You hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, what's up, bro? Nah, I'm just getting my vitamins. Yeah, dang, I literally just forgot what we were talking about. No, dude, I'm I'm trying to get you and Dr. Weiss's name around as much as I can. It's especially Dr. Weiss because
Yeah.
again, it's dang, I literally just forgot what it is we were talking about like 2 minutes ago. That's why I was like loading up the
Well, yeah,
StreamYard.
no, spread Dr. Weiss for sure. And I don't know if it was you or someone else, but the Dr. Peterson reference, like the Dr. Peterson of archaeology, I feel like that could be helpful potentially in spreading her around, because that does kind of like put it, again, just like the YouTube thing, it puts it into a framework that people are more familiar with. You start talking about NAGPRA, and it's like people don't they
Oh,
don't know
I
nothing
just
stuff in archaeology. They're not familiar with this, but they're
I
familiar with Dr. Peterson.
yeah, I just remembered. I just remembered. I have a coworker who was both a veteran and worked in archaeology, and he I'm gonna keep it plain and simple and not too exposure because of my work, but we had training about disputed territories and indigenous lands, and it was just me and one other coworker, and this is the guy who gave me my training, and I brought it up. He's like, dude, I fucking know. And because we've had dang. Give me a second. I just been smoking and drinking all day. I'm just trying to find I've been trying to I'm trying to keep it light vocabulary. And I was like, you know about this? He's like, yeah, I know about NACRA. And I'm like, so the digital aspect of, NACRA is it, I mean, the physical material and the written down legislation or NACRA, is that spilling over into private corporations? Because, oh, look, sweet helicopter. Yeah, some motherfucker just.
Yeah, what was his answer to that?
He's like, yeah, dude, I know. He's like, yeah, it's fucking weird. I mean, dude, like when it's like private group meetings and it's like 2, 3, 4 of us, he's like, dude, I don't even have to record this, and I can cuss all I want. And it's like, yeah, dude. Oh yeah, by the way, I work for a tech company that, like, on my floor we have those who like to identify as somebody who don't look as they identify. I'm just being kind. So, but yeah, no, it is for real, bro.
So he was saying that NAGPRA is creeping into private businesses already.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
it's affecting their decisions.
all I'm gonna say is the documentation that was provided to us is no longer available, and when we do
Documentation for what?
documentation on reporting and naming and basically whatever you see if you search one of these res lands is what is shown to you on the name and placard card. Like if you search one of these places.
Dude, I have no idea what you're saying.
Hold on.
The question is NAGPRA creeping into
Yes, it absolutely
businesses?
is. Okay, you want to know how much it creeps in? They have their own seasons of when they let people in and out. When they let people in and don't let people, like, yeah, my bad. What is it? They have seasons about when they do let outsiders in and seasons of when they don't let outsiders in. That has
Onto
to be
like the reservations.
yes. On this,
Okay.
yeah. So that has to be taken into consideration, except all of the documentation now that they provide for us is basically the equivalent of an in-system, in-company error 404 file not found. It's gone to that point.
What is it? So I'm not understanding what the documentation is or
So
isn't.
okay. Imagine you grab your smartphone, you pull up whatever application you use to find a geographical location. You type in the names of these places.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows it to you. They'll show all the reservations and the dash lines. There'll be separate spots because these people have different separated lands that they own under one administration, under the Bureau of Land Management and Interior Department, blah, 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 right? So what it is now, all of our documentation, because what is it? God dang it, I'm trying to figure out the words for this. We basically are the last line of seeing. If you look it up on your phone, we're the ones who verify the source info of what is shown on the phone. If you're like a dumb fat retard just pulling up, you're driving cross country through America and you want to look up, oh, what's this reservation? You type it in. Yeah.
I'm not understanding the significance or
No. What the
what you're
significance
saying.
is
I'm cutting
our
you off, man.
income.
I
What
don't
is it?
know. Call in when you're more
No.
sober.
The in
I know.
company. No,
I've tried
it's
getting it
cut
out of
off.
you. The audience is telling me to move on. I'm ready to move
The in
on.
company. What is it? The in company provided information is no longer available. That's what I'm trying to get at. This is
So it's just like you're no longer able to get geographical and name information on these reservations.
It's geographical. It is even workflow. Like, you know how there's a box? It's like, what do you want to do? Yes or no? And the arrow split. That's all gone. Everything's missing. And this stuff was available some few years ago, and it's no longer available. That's the problem.
I still don't understand what exactly you're trying to say or why it matters. But
NAGPRA is becoming fascist.
yes,
It is the
I agree with you on
implementation.
that one.
It is the implementation of governmental policy through the means of private business, and I'm literally on the front lines of this, and I literally just spent a week dealing with this. That's what I'm trying to get at.
That was a good summary.
Sorry
Still
for
don't know
being
the specifics, but that was a great summary. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, man. It seemed like there might be something important there, but I don't know what he was trying to say about I don't know what work he's doing. And it seemed like you kind of had to understand how his office operates to understand what he was saying. But, regardless, it does sound like NAGPRA and NAGPRA-esque things are creeping into the decision-making, of private businesses, which is crazy. Yeah, we got a bit of Slav face there at the end. I don't know if he meant to, but we got it. So, what I was saying before is I'm mentally pretty strong, right? But it is a bit difficult when the whole world is telling you you're wrong. And, I learned recently that during COVID, I lived in the number one most vaccinated county in the country. So when I talk about COVID and I talk with it about other people, I was always frustrated, always confused because I would talk about it and people would always be like, yeah, it wasn't that bad, man. I don't know. I didn't really experience any of that. And I was as passive and as gentle and as well behaved as I possibly could be. I was physically trying to make myself seem meek and stuff, because I never wore a mask. I never got vaccinated. I never participated in any of that, but I tried to be as cordial and polite about it as possible. And it's the things that I experienced and went through and the consistency of experiencing them and going through them was just ridiculous. And yeah, I never, it was always very confusing to me talking about it with other people because they're like, yeah, I don't really remember that. And I'm like, how do none of you remember living through this? And I guess other people didn't live through it. I guess they didn't, but I did. I just wanted to share that because it was something I just learned. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. But yeah, I was mentally strong enough to make it through that. But and I really don't question myself too harshly when it comes to history, but I do periodically have to check myself. And it's when the whole world is telling you you're wrong, even when you're right, occasionally you do have to take a step back and just look at everything again and go, could I be missing something? Could this be me? Could they all be right? And I always come to the conclusion that no, I am right, they're wrong. But it's a laborious process, The comedian, unpopular opinion, her fainting had absolutely nothing to do with the vaccine. go watch the video again, and she tries to twerk, and I think she threw her back out. I think she tried to twerk and she threw her back out. And if you've ever done that, you know it can affect like your blood pressure and stuff. She never quite stands back up straight again after that attempted twerking. And I think that's what caused her to pass out. She threw her back out trying to twerk. She was old, had nothing to do with the vaccine. And that's embarrassing. So she probably never fully admitted to it. And she passed out for that reason. Yeah, Leonardo's pretty good. Yeah, the twerk wasn't a good twerk. It was an attempted twerk. Hey, you guys can disagree with me. That's totally fine. I don't care. But that's my opinion on it. I've held that opinion from day one. I still hold it. So thank you, fellas, for tuning in. I've had a good time. If no one else wants to call in, I'm going to peace out. I'll give you like 1 or 2 minutes to call in, and then I'm going to shut down the stream. But I'm going to be coming back next week with more vase talk, and I've got a lot more Indian talk too. A lot of stuff to cover with India, and some really, really interesting developments with the vases. Developments with me, India, at least. What's up, and, G? Can you mute me in the background?
Really, really interesting developments.
How's it going, man? Goob, can you hear me?
Ooh, I can.
Hold on a second. I'm not. For some reason, I can't hear you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, we're listening to him on there.
Oh, why is this not?
Oh, okay, Goob. Well, I'm kind of retarded, but obviously you know that.
Okay.
Adjust my volume. Blah 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 blah. I don't know. Here we go. We're gonna get rid of that. Bear with me, buddy.
There's something pretty wrong with your audio. Yeah. All right, he's out. Yeah, call back in. Try that again. You were super loud at first, and then your audio went all wonky. Let's try this again.
Oh, yeah, listen to that. Now I can hear you. I don't know. I'm a bit of a boomer. How you doing, Goob?
Doing well. You're just loud. Talk again. Let me see if that's better.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Goob? Can you hear me?
That's
Can
better.
you hear me?
All right.
All right. Awesome. So in the Discord, I sent a video link from this guy, Adventures with Roger. I don't know if you got a chance to look at it or if you noticed that.
What was it about?
So basically, the guy is like from Indiana, and like he does like all these natural like Indian earthworks and stuff like that, and like caves and old stuff like that. And basically, he was going around to a bunch of museums to try to find stuff about the mound builders, right? And he was running across this thing where like a bunch of the museums were shut down, and then a bunch of the stuff wasn't being displayed. And he was wondering why, you know what I mean? And I don't know if he really came to this conclusion or not, but like 2 or 3 of the museums literally like closed the shop, you know what I mean? Closed the doors. Like you could see it.
It's happened a lot.
Yeah. And one of them, it was funny because they were like saying that they were, excuse the fact that we don't have the stuff up, but we're working on it is basically what it said. But I don't think this dude came to that conclusion. I don't know. He definitely didn't say it was NAGPRA. He didn't name that. You know what I mean? But it sounds like it,
Yeah, no, I mean, he probably doesn't know about NAGPRA. And my guess would be he's just like realizing, okay, something's going on that these are like systematically being erased. And he probably doesn't know that it's NAGPRA that's responsible.
Right. Yeah. So it's Adventures with Roger, and it's like the newest video he's got. But so he went to a few like local museums, that weren't funded, and they had stuff, and that's where he could see the most of the stuff. But it was like all the Indian artifacts were gone, and he was specifically looking for the mound builder stuff, which should be plenty.
That I've found is that because there are still like. I found a website that has a very large gallery of Native American artifacts. I don't remember what tribe or whatever, but they're recent, they're modern, relatively speaking, right? They're not thousands of years old. Going back to like the Hopewell and the Andean and, these cultures that are from a couple thousand years ago, that seems to be what's been scrubbed the most thoroughly and the most immediately. And those are the least related to the modern tribes.
Right.
So should have the least motivation for scrubbing and erasing. So yeah, it is from NAGPRA, but like this is part of the reason. There's many reasons, but like part of the reason why I go conspiratorial with this, I go, there is an effort to erase history. Like this is this is beyond just NAGPRA and woke stuff. Like there are other ulterior motives here.
100%.
So like again, so the NAGPRA thing, right? I remember when that came out with the Kennewick man, because I remember that whole thing, because I remember the deal was, what'd she say? He was white or he's black, but he's not Indian. You know what I mean?
He was South American Indian and white, and some other stuff potentially as well.
Right. But don't fit the mold. Any way you slice it, he's from down there, older than it should be. And yeah, but the NAGPRA thing started when, in 99? 1990. Holy cow. And it was a law. Who, like, explain it to me real quick, because Danny B's here with me, and I couldn't really remember.
So, John McCain was a big involved in NAGPRA. Him and like a Hawaiian dude or something. He had a name, he had one of those last names. I don't know what it was. Anyways, they were largely involved in like getting this passed. And they have quotes that you can read about how the intention of this law was to strike a balance between the ability of archaeologists to conduct scientific experiments and natives to be respected in their culture, because before NAGPRA you had examples of people like walking into museums and seeing their grandfather on display. It's a little bit much, so they go, we need to rein this in a little bit. But they talk about how the intention is for archaeologists to conduct their scientific research, and then once the scientific research has been conducted, then we can address repatriating it and returning it to the natives. That's all been completely thrown out the window with the 2024 January 12th update. You have the Department of Interior claiming that the intention of this law was never to strike a balance between science and the natives, that science is not a factor, and exclusively repatriation of these artifacts is the exclusive purpose of this law.
It sounds like more Biden liberal crap.
It was
that's private fascism.
Biden installed the first Native American Department of Interior secretary ever, and she
Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, you took the words right out of my mouth.
She is an activist and woke, and like you can go to her Twitter. She's got all kinds of stuff about climate change and about all kinds of woke.
Yeah,
causes.
she's a bot.
And so she's largely because NAGPRA wasn't necessarily the worst thing ever when it was initially written. Like, yeah, there were some hits to archaeology, and there were a lot of archaeologists in 1990 who were very upset about NAGPRA and were talking about how it's the end of archaeology and all that. But it wasn't the end. It did hinder it somewhat, but it certainly wasn't the end of it. But now with these interpretations, like the intention is to end archaeology in America.
It was the first part of the bill was a soft kill, and now they've put the nail in the coffin. Like they had that on the. They probably initially thought, let's do this, and now we have to reel it back. We don't want to ruffle feathers. We got to ease them into it, like they do most of this stuff. Put the frog in the water and turn up the heat. He won't jump out. Now they get what they want, and what they really want is to erase everything and have total top-down control over history from their points of view, and have nothing to do with reality, but fit their narrative and their picture that they're trying to paint, that white men are bad and that all we did is mess everything up, and they're and look at all these people we hurt, so they're going to hide all this way to hide, to steal history and hide it behind white guilt. Like, oh, we're bad, we came here and did all this stuff. Like, there's so much
a very big
more
part of it.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is that very era is the era. It's like, oh, trust all native voices until they go, hey, when we showed up, there were giant redheaded white people here. You know what I mean?
On trusting native voices, I read a memo from Biden yesterday or 2 days ago that was very, very interesting. I think I linked it in the Discord as well. He put out a memo that effectively stated that every single government employee had to defer to Native Americans. Basically saying that no government employee is allowed to criticize or contradict Native Americans. And he specifically goes, so he says all government employees, but then he goes on to specify that scientists need to listen to them and defer to them and cannot contradict them or insult them. And then goes on to define even more specifically that climate scientists, that agriculture, that food, that land management, and he might have mentioned one or two others, but that they very specifically must defer to Native American and cannot contradict them or question them or anything like that.
Yeah, that's closet fascism.
Yeah, and well,
that was from Biden. Not
wow.
Yeah, that was from Biden, I believe.
Wow, it's crazy. And the last thing was kind of right, like fascism, or like when the commies did that bit with the science where they were like, oh, we want to make plants grow in the cold, so we'll just put them in the cold and make them grow in the cold. You know what I mean? And then everybody's starved because the plants don't grow like that. You can't just like kind of try to make them adapt. It don't really work like that.
Baby.
Exactly. It's what plants crave. But
it's got electrolytes.
All right, good talking to you, my friend.
Yeah, man.
All right. Talk to you later, Tater. Bye.
You too. But it is obviously NAGPRA is a huge issue in itself, but it's much bigger than NAGPRA. You have things like that memo. You have all kinds of stuff going on, but it's all working in congruence with each other. It's all forcing things towards one end, which is the erasure of history, which is the total rewriting of history. And it's not even just that. It's the 1984ifying of history, because they don't just want to erase and rewrite history. They want to erase history and rewrite it and have it able to be rewritten at a whim. So whatever today's version of history is what history is, right? And tomorrow it can be something totally different, and the next day something totally different again. And that's the end goal here. It would be bad enough if they were just trying to erase it and replace it with something new, but no, they're 1984ifying this. They're trying to replace it and erase it and replace it with consistently new, if that makes sense. You can call them that. All right, that's the episode, fellas. Thank you for tuning in. I had a good time. Hopefully you guys had a good time too. Back with more Vases talk. Gonna go watch. I'm gonna actually break. I think I'll probably do a proper response to Night Scarab's videos is probably what I'll try and do. Because I think his videos are good enough that they deserve that. And they're also incorrect enough that I can. So that's the plan. Catch you guys next week. Peace out, fellas.